Is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on the Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. So as you all know, I am back on YouTube. My first episode was last Tuesday, and that was the first one in about 7.5 months, I would say, not covering college football or any sports or anything for that matter for, basically a whole year as I took my hiatus, but I am back in full swing, and currently going on is the NFL draft, and there has been a lot of drama that has happened, a lot of questionable picks, a lot of teams actually making smart decisions, and some teams that used to not make smart decisions are making smart decisions. And we're going to talk about all of that today. So right now, it's Saturday, April 25th at 1:48 p.m., and currently it is the fourth round, pick number 36. The Saints are on the clock at the time of this video being recorded. So I am going over the NFL draft up to this point, and I will also be talking a little bit of the NBA playoffs at the end of the video. But right now, at the beginning of this video, this is strictly all, I know I'm usually all college football, but this is basically it. The 2026 NFL draft live in Pittsburgh, PA is, underway. It's been an eventful couple days, so we're going to get right into it, and we're going to talk about a couple shockers, I'd say, and a couple things that, were smart choices by some teams that, in general, don't really have a good, track record of drafting well. So first, it was no surprise. We're going to start off with literally probably the most questionable pick out of everybody in the first round, and that is at pick number 13, Ty Simpson, quarterback from Alabama, being drafted by the Los Angeles Rams. So Ty Simpson is, my honest opinion of him, he's an okay quarterback. He's a good prospect. I understand why people fell in love with him this season, but that's exactly my problem with him, is that he's had 1 year under his belt as a starter in college football. Now, granted, he made the college football playoff. He made the SEC championship game against Georgia, even though they got throttled. The fact of the matter remains is, I really don't think this pick was necessary. I get it. I 100% understand drafting your quarterback for the future. But I think that's more so in the sense of, either like later this season, you expect this quarterback to, start to be a franchise quarterback. As we all know, the Los Angeles Rams have Matthew Stafford right now, Super Bowl champion Matthew Stafford. I know that he's up in age. I know that he probably only has 1 to 2 more good years left before, like everybody, father time catches up, and eventually Matthew Stafford's going to retire. Eventually, the Rams are going to need to move off of Stafford. So, from that aspect, I understand. But if you still have, a 2-year window with Matthew Stafford to where you are viable enough, you were literally plays away from going to the Super Bowl last year against the Seattle Seahawks. So, I don't think there's much you need to change about the roster, but it would have been nice if you added another weapon for Matthew Stafford. Personally, at 13, with everything falling the way it did, I really thought that the Rams at this point would have took Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver from USC. There was a lot of turmoil and issues surrounding Mekhi Lemon. I guess his maturity issues, the way he carries himself. His pre-draft process was kind of a mess and a disaster with the way he handled a bunch of questions at the podium, but that pick alone would have been great for Matthew Stafford. If there's one thing that they were missing is a secondary option to Puka Nacua. Now, I know they had Devontae Adams, but Devontae Adams is up in age. He's been hurt in recent years, so you don't know how many more good years that Devontae Adams has. Granted, he's still a good player, but I don't think he's a viable number 2 option right now. I think he's more of he's like a 2B to moving on a 3 right now. I think he is a great third option to have on a Super Bowl winning team. But this Ty Simpson at 13 makes no sense to me. I mean, Dominique Foxworth literally said Rams selection of Ty Simpson is a risky bet. Like, really? You think so? A risky bet, considering Ty Simpson only has 1 year starting of college football under his belt, and towards the back end of the year, he didn't play necessarily great. He got throttled in the SEC title game, and then he got bulldozed by Fernando Mendoza in the Rose Bowl in the college football playoff. Now, I know they did beat Oklahoma, but that was an Oklahoma team in the college football playoff with a quarterback that has been beat up pretty much, 3/4 of the season, who was playing with an injury. And granted, he didn't play bad, but he didn't play great. And that was an Oklahoma team that absolutely could not run the football. Now, part of Ty Simpson's problems at Alabama was the fact that he had no run game to lean on. He really didn't. Alabama was one of the worst rushing teams in the SEC that I've ever seen last year. The fact that they could not run the ball consistently, that is the most out of touch reality moment, I think, in college football, at least in recent memory, when it comes to like a run game. Plenty of other teams can actually run the football in the SEC, but seeing Alabama not be able to after years upon years of dominating run games like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Bo Scarborough, you got Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson, Eddie Lacy, TJ Yeldon. The list goes on of Bama running backs and great Bama run games, but Ty Simpson didn't really have much help in the matter. But all that being said, Ty Simpson still is a very raw prospect in my mind. Now, he is the second quarterback. I did think he was the second most talented quarterback in this draft, but I have been the one saying that I don't think Fernando Mendoza and any other quarterback draft, including even last year, I don't think Fernando Mendoza is a number 1 overall pick. I don't think he's the first quarterback taken off the board last year. He may have been the second, but I wouldn't take Fernando Mendoza over Cam Ward. I wouldn't take him over Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. That's just me personally, but I think with stylistic of play, I personally wouldn't. Do I think Fernando's going to be good at the Raiders? Yes, I do, eventually, because I think now the Raiders are becoming more competent as a franchise. And I do think Ty Simpson landed in one of the best possible situations, being with the LA Rams. Sean McVay makes everything work for everybody. I mean, Sean McVay got Jared Goff to a Super Bowl at one point when everybody wrote Jared Goff off as a bust. But picking a quarterback that's only got 1 year of college football under his belt and he didn't necessarily play that good towards the back half of the year, I don't understand that pick. I really don't. I think you should have. I mean, you could have bolstered that defense a little bit more. There was plenty of great defensive players left to pick from, but I get drafting for the future. But here's the thing. Here's the difference between two teams that eventually want to see their future franchise quarterback. Fernando Mendoza does not have to play immediately. By comparison, Ty Simpson doesn't have to play immediately. But the difference being, Kirk Cousins for the Raiders is a rental. If anything, Fernando Mendoza is going to start towards the back half of the year, maybe even to Thanksgiving. Fernando Mendoza more than likely is going to have the reins of the team towards the end of the year because it's Kirk Cousins. While he's a good pro, had a great career, he's old, he's brittle, he's mistake prone. Fernando Mendoza is going to wait at minimum probably 8 weeks before he's thrusted into the starting lineup. I don't think it's the same situation when it comes to LA because, one, Stafford's just coming off an MVP season. There's nothing telling me that Stafford is going to fall off drastically enough to where it warrants putting Ty Simpson in over him. And then again, Stafford probably has another year left in the tank. That's a great year from him. So, and you can even see the look on Sean McVay's face that he clearly did not like this pick. Now, I know it's been clips upon clips of just him, scowling, and that press conference after they picked Ty Simpson necessarily wasn't a great look at all. But just seeing this, from a football perspective and from a franchise perspective, I understand why you go with Ty Simpson. You will have a need at quarterback, but I think that could have waited till next year. I think that could have possibly waited to the year after. The NFL, you're in a win now kind of mode for a lot of these good teams. They're in win now. The Rams only have, again, 1 or 2 more years left of prime Matt Stafford before he falls off a cliff or he just up and retires, or God forbid he gets hurt, unfortunately. That's just the reality of football. But if you're in that win now, put all your chips in the table when it comes to, if you're LA, you got to go all in and give Stafford as much help as he needs to make a Super Bowl run. If you think you can get another Super Bowl out of this guy, then you give him as much help as possible, because at the end of the day, if it gives you a Super Bowl, okay, then let's say you're, subpar for the next 4 years. Nobody's going to care because you just got a Super Bowl out of it. So nobody's going to really bat an eyelash about that. But it's just the fact, if you wasted a potential superstar, adding a potential superstar to, help out Matt, your old veteran quarterback who's still in his prime, who can still, he's just coming off an MVP season. He's clearly still a Super Bowl caliber quarterback and a Super Bowl caliber player. Why you would go with Ty Simpson, I really don't know. It's puzzling to me, to say the least. All right, so the next topic we're going to get into, still in the first round, we're going to talk about. Usually in every single draft, there's usually 1 or 2 guys that, are great players, but maybe there's one thing that people don't like about him and it causes him to fall. The extreme version of this is last year when Shedeur Sanders was getting drafted. Mel Kiper losing his mind on NFL Network was so funny to watch. He's probably the biggest, thought to mind when it comes to players dropping in the draft because of certain aspects of either their character or their game in general. Shedeur was hyped up to be a first-round quarterback. He ended up dropping to the 5th round to Cleveland. So usually in the draft, there's a couple players that maybe don't even necessarily drop that much. Again, like I said, that's an extreme condition, an extreme, example of this happening. But some guys maybe projected top 10 or top 7 end up falling to mid-first to late-first for whatever reason. And a lot of people thought, maybe it's going to be Jordan Tyson from Arizona State or Sonny Styles from Ohio State. A lot of people thought that there were a bunch of different players that could drop for any arbitrary amount of reasons. But the one that surprised me was defensive end from Miami, Ruben Bain. A lot of people projected him top 10 easily. I was one of those people saying that he's the best pure defensive end in this draft. A lot of people, you can make the argument David Bailey, Arvell Reese, there's a lot of people you can make an argument for who's the best pure defensive end in the draft, but just based on sheer, motor, mentality, brutality, physical toughness, I think Ruben Bain exemplifies all of that stuff. So from projected to top 7, he falls to number 15, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who people thought would draft his running mate, Akeem Mesidor, at the other defensive end at Miami. People thought the Tampa Bay was going to draft him if it came to that, because nobody expected Ruben Bain to fall that far. But this is all because of his, arm length. Generally, in history tells us that a defensive end that plays with such physicality and ferocity, with that certain aspect, who's a power rusher. He's not necessarily known for his speed. He has speed, but he's a physical, blunt force trauma kind of defensive end. He bullies people. He bullies the offensive line. But usually those defensive ends have longer arms, a longer wingspan. So Ruben Bain's 30.5-inch arms apparently is, question of concern for a lot of NFL teams. And those who know football understand that arm length does not matter. I mean, sure. Does it matter a little bit? Sure, I guess. But you know what does matter? What you do on the football field. Film matters. And when you turn on the film, Ruben Bain jumps out of the television. Now, everybody knows I'm a Miami Hurricane fan. I've been a Miami Hurricane fan since I was a young kid. Ruben Bain is one of the most impressive defensive players that I have ever seen come out of Miami, and I've seen plenty of great quality defensive players to come out of Miami. And, you can just list a plethora of the Hall of Famers and all pros that have come out of the University of Miami on the defensive side of the football. Sean Taylor, Ed Reed, Ray Lewis, Warren Sapp, DJ Williams, Jonathan Vilma, Antrell Roll, John Beeson. The list goes on and on of, so many great Miami Hurricane defenders. And Ruben Bain is looking to be, the next great Miami defensive player to enter the NFL. So I thought that was very fascinating, just how, one little aspect of someone's game or someone's build, apparently, warrants them dropping so much in the draft. But I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this part of the draft, I think they got an absolute steal getting Ruben Bain at 15. I think Ruben Bain's going to be lights out. He may not be a guy that jumps out and gets 15 and a half sacks every single year. He more than likely won't be a Myles Garrett or a Jared Verse or a, TJ Watt level of getting sacks. But this dude is a game wrecker. Ruben Bain is just a menace at the line of scrimmage. If anybody knows football, you can turn on the tape and clearly see like his physicality, his toughness, his bend, his game in general. He bullies offensive lines. He bullies the opposition. That's just what he does. And I think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had an excellent draft up to this point. I know in the 4th round, they got his teammate, Keontae Scott, who plays cornerback from Miami, I believe he was the runner-up for the Thorpe Award for the best DB in college football, just behind Caleb Downs, who went to the Dallas Cowboys at 11. But I thought that was fascinating that Ruben Bain dropped that much in the 1st round. But I think it works out because, anybody who ends up at a crappy team, I really feel bad about. And I'm so glad Ruben Bain did not end up at the Dolphins or anything like that. So Ruben Bain, probably one of the biggest draft falls, in recent memory. Not to quite the extent of Shadur Sanders, but, just a small drop-off from someone who was projected to be top 10. All right, now we're going to talk about probably one of the earlier picks that was probably come off as the most shocking. And I've heard mixed opinions on this, and that is the Tennessee Titans at number 4 drafting Carnell Tate from Ohio State, wide receiver. A lot of people, the one consistent thing I have been hearing from people, and this is, why would you draft a wide receiver top 5 if you don't think if he more than likely won't be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL? Here's the one counter argument I would have. If anybody watched the Tennessee Titans last year, you would know why it wouldn't matter. I don't care at number 4. I wouldn't have cared if it was Carnell Tate, which it was. I don't care if it's Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Elijah Surratt, any Jordan Tyson. Like, you can name off any of these receivers in this year's draft that are hyped up, 1st through 4th round or whatever. I don't think anybody would be complaining about taking a receiver at this point. I don't care who it is. If you witnessed how the Tennessee Titans wide receivers did last year, now granted, Tennessee is not a good team right now. They're not. But Cam Ward had absolutely zero help last year. If anybody turned on any Tennessee Titan football game, does Cam Ward sometimes hold the ball too long? Yes. Does he sometimes make reckless throws that sometimes are picked off and sometimes are caught? Yes. But the Tennessee Titans led the NFL in drops last year. I'm pretty sure at least, but it wouldn't surprise me. So I have no mental reservations about this pick at all. I know Carnell Tate at 4 seems a little high. I know. But compared to, Calvin Ridley last year, Chimere Dike last year, and a plethora of other wide receivers that could not catch the ball for Cam Ward, I think Carnell Tate to Tennessee makes probably the most sense. Just because Arizona took Jeremiah Love, a lot of people thought that they were going to take a tackle. And then most mock drafts had Tennessee taking probably Jeremiah Love. Well, if Jeremiah Love was still there and Tennessee took him, which they more than likely would have, nobody would be saying anything. But it's just the fact that they drafted Carnell Tate higher than probably most people had on their draft boards. But again, I will defend the Titans and their organization for taking Carnell Tate at number 4 overall, just based on how terrible and awful the Tennessee Titans wide receiving core was last year at catching the football. And one of my favorite players plays in that wide receiver room, which they need to give him more of a shot. Tennessee Titans need, I believe it's Bryce Oliver and Xavier Restrepo. I think those two can be studs for the Tennessee Titans. They absolutely need more of an opportunity to play. Calvin Ridley's good. He is. But he had massive drop problems last year. Chimere Dike, I think he's more of a punt returner and a return specialist. He didn't do bad either last year, even though that being his first year too. I believe it's Alec Iomanor is the other guy. I believe he was from Stanford. Again, drops is the biggest problem that the Tennessee Titans suffered last year. And Cam Ward, say what you want about his play style. A good majority of the time, he put the ball where it needed to be, and his receivers just couldn't make the plays that they needed to make. So I will defend the pick of Carnell Tate at number 4. All right, one more topic. I'm going to talk, 2 more, actually. Yeah. So probably one of the more questionable picks of the first round, among Ty Simpson at 13 to the Rams was easily the most shocking. Easily, not even close when it comes to that. One of the biggest shocks for me, though, was the Minnesota Vikings drafting Caleb Banks at 18th overall, defensive tackle from Florida. I get why they drafted him. I really do. Sorry, that was an ad on my laptop because I'm on ESPN. Sorry about that. But so when it comes to Caleb Banks, defensive tackle from Florida, I get the hype around him. His build is crazy. 6'6", 330. But here's the problem. He played 3 games this year. He played 3 games this past year in college football. How on earth are you going to draft someone with an injury history like this? I forget how many injuries this guy has had, but this guy has had more injuries right now currently in his state than some NFL players get in their entire career. In 2025 for the Florida Gators, he had 2 solo tackles, 4 assisted tackles, no sacks, no forced fumbles, no interceptions, nothing. 6 total tackles on the year, but because he got hurt. I get this dude has unbelievable upside. This dude has superstar level upside, I'd say. But I feel like pick number 18, again, I think it's too big of a risk to take on a guy that's this brittle, this injury prone already, and someone who only played 3 games of the year this past year. So I don't even know what the Minnesota Vikings are thinking at this point. There was plenty of defensive players that were available at the time that they took this guy. I'm trying to pull it up right now. We're going back to, So Caleb Banks was drafted at 18. Some other notable defensive players that were drafted after him, Akeem Messidor comes to mind, defensive end from Miami. Dylan Thieneman from Oregon, the safety. Defensive tackle Peter Woods from Clemson. And Keldrick Falk, defensive end from Auburn. I just named a bunch of them right there. On the defensive line, too. Minus the safety I just mentioned, but Peter Woods, Akeem Messidor, Kedrick Falk, sorry. There's defensive players that played the whole year and that were very, very good players. Maybe don't have necessarily the upside that a Caleb Banks has at his position. But I feel like that was too big of a risk to take on someone who is this injury prone coming out of college and literally only played 3 games of the season and didn't necessarily produce great stats in those 3 games of this past season. So that was a real head scratcher for me. And then one last thing, I want to nitpick on the Giants picks real quick. So overall, this draft has been real fun, but the Giants had the opportunity to really stick it to Dallas because, as everybody knows, the Dallas Cowboys drafted Caleb Downs at number 11, as they should have. I know for a long time that they wanted Caleb Downs, and the way people were drafting based off of need, it was more and more apparent that Caleb Downs would still be available at the 11th, because if you drafted basically strictly on who the best football player is, I would make an argument that Caleb Downs is the best football player in this draft, and it might be Caleb Downs, Jeremiah Love, and then kind of a drop-off from there as far as superstars, talent that, are basically like 100 out of 100 can't miss kind of prospects. The fact is, I struggle with the Giants, picks. Taking Arvell Reese, hybrid linebacker D-end at number 5. Arvell Reese was a great player this past year in college football, but he is very, very raw. He is someone who needs time to develop. He is someone who needs time to hone in those skills to be, a great NFL player. I felt like they could have done better at this pick. A lot of people are more upset that they took Francisco Maui-Noa, offensive tackle from Miami, at number 10, which I understand why, because you could have had Arvell Reese and Caleb Downs, the 2 great Ohio State products. You probably over the number 1 player in the draft, according to many, and then arguably the best safety to come out since probably Ed Reed. I think they fumbled the bag in that aspect of they could have had their division rival, basically twiddling their thumbs, not knowing what to do if they took Caleb Downs. I think if anything, they should have grabbed Caleb Downs at 5, let the chips fall how they would, which more than likely they would have. If anything, the only thing that I could see changing would have been Sonny Styles dropping a little bit, because I feel like that the Washington Commanders would have took Arvell Reese there. So if anything, they could have still grabbed Francisco Maui-Noa at number 10, but I really think they should have drafted Caleb Downs over Arvell Reese. I understand the hype around Arvell Reese. I really think he's going to be a good pro, but he needs more time to develop. But I guess the Giants do have time. They do have time to develop him. I mean, it's a new regime there, new front office. You got John Harbaugh coming in. I think he's going to work in New York. I really do. But man, it would have been so funny to see the Dallas Cowboys yet again twiddling their thumbs, not knowing what to do. All right, we're going to finish off the show a little bit, not super, super long, but we're going to finish with the NBA playoffs. And, off the top of my head, as of right now, this is what it currently stands at. In the East, the Pistons and Magic are tied in their series 1-1. Cleveland leads the Raptors 2-1. Atlanta leads the Knicks 2-1. Boston leads the 76ers 2-1. And then in the West, you have OKC leading the Suns 2-0. The Lakers leading the Rockets 3-0. The Timberwolves leading the Nuggets 2-1. And then the Spurs leading the Trailblazers 2-1. But I do want to talk about the Lakers just slightly. LeBron is really putting on a clinic in this year. But again, I want to put this to bed a little bit. I can't ever see LeBron James as the greatest player of all time, specifically because if he doesn't win a championship, the longer his career goes and he doesn't win a championship, I think that gap widens a little bit more between him and Jordan, because LeBron James at a point spent, like, he'll have spent more time losing in the finals than actually winning the finals. It's impressive nonetheless of what he's been able to do. And I do find it funny that the oldest player in the NBA pretty much, in LeBron, is more healthy always than, some guys like Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves on his own team. But as far as the Lakers, I don't know the exact time frame of when Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves are coming back, but LeBron is playing lights out right now. LeBron's playing like vintage LeBron in the playoffs. Houston's folding, unfortunately, because I picked Houston to win this series. I thought they'd win like 4-1, 4-2. And of course, the Lakers are on the verge of sweeping them, which I don't think anybody... If you told me at the beginning of the NBA playoffs, no Luka Doncic, no Austin Reeves, and just LeBron and, Luke Kennard and DeAndre Ayton and Rui Hachimura, if you would have told me it's them against the Rockets with Kevin Durant and their upside that they have, I would have said, you're full of it. If you told me that the Lakers would be leading 3-0 at this point. So I think that's fascinating. I just think it's fascinating to watch. I'm really pulling for Cleveland this year because I want to see James Harden finally get his ring. And he's been balling out for the Cleveland Cavs right now. So I'm riding with the Cavs in this playoffs. But more than likely, it's going to be the Spurs or it's going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I'm pulling for the Cavaliers this time. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's installment of The Lake Show, everyone. I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something, don't take for granted.